for Research, Middle East Policy. The event, featuring a number of panels, examines the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, as well as Israel's influence in American politics and media. Participants include former members of Congress and the military, authors, journalists, and professors. It's just getting underway, live from the National Press Club in Washington, D.C.
On behalf of the organizers, the Institute for Research, Middle East Policy, Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, the Council for the National Interest, and If Americans Knew, I'd like to welcome you to the National Summit to reassess the U.S.-Israel special relationship. We are pleased that you have joined us for an unprecedented, and we feel long overdue, public examination of how our government's extraordinary support for Israel affects Americans. We have chosen to include an unusually large number of speakers to participate in this summit in order to provide as thorough an array of expertise as possible. Because of this abundance of riches, we will, of necessity, be adhering to a very rigorous schedule. Questions will be held at the end of each panel, at which time we will accommodate as many as time permits. Facilitators will bring a microphone to those who wish to ask questions. Each question must be limited to 1 minute so that as many attendees as possible will have a chance to ask a question. If anyone fails to abide by the necessary requirements, the moderator will remind the individual of these schedule requirements and request the person stop. If the individual continues with inappropriately timed or excessively lengthy comments, we will again direct the person to stop. If the individual continues to speak out of turn, we will have to then ask security to escort the person out of the room so that the event can continue. Everybody wants to give a speech on C-SPAN. I'm giving one right now. It's great. But if you weren't invited to give a speech here today, I'm sorry, you'll have to stick to the questions. I appreciate it. Also, in the interest of time, we will not be giving speakers' bios during the panels. Instead, we have provided extended speaker bios in your program. As you can see, we are videotaping the entire summit, and we'll be posting this on the website. Therefore, we ask that others not video it. The organizers promise that the video will be up as soon as possible. That's at natsummit.org. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today.
Hello, welcome, thank you for being here. I'm honored to introduce the founder of the Council for the National Interest, the Honorable Paul Findley, former United States Congressman from Illinois, expert in American political processes, courageous author whose book, They Dare to Speak Out, first exposed the power of the Israel lobby, patriotic American who served his country in war and in peace, and human being of profound intellect, insight, and integrity. Paul Findley.
Thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome. The first Israeli settlement was established in the early 1970s, 40 years ago. It was wrong. It should have been resisted by a torrent of protest across the country. It did not come. And I freely admit my own personal guilt. I should have done more. I should have made this the cause of the day every day from then on. But today I have what I call happy news. There is a way out, and it's a way that is humane, just, and peaceful. Not one shot out of a gun is required. Not one extra dollar or shekel is required. President Barack Obama, acting alone, can extricate Palestine, Israel, and America from the seemingly inescapable quagmire in which all three are sinking these days. To make peace possible, Obama must issue an executive order suspending all aid to Israel until Israel and Palestine conclude a peace treaty that creates a two-state solution. Israel must recognize Palestine's sovereignty over all territories seized in the 1967 war. All Israeli personnel and officials must leave Palestine. Only those approved by the government of Palestine would be able to remain as foreign nationals. Now that is the negative side of the picture from the standpoint of Israelis. Look at the positive effect this would have on the state of Israel. For the first time in history, Israelis would be able to achieve peace and security at home and abroad, a prospect that's unthinkable today. Arab states long ago agreed to recognize Israel and have peaceful relations with Israel once Palestine became nationally sovereign and politically independent, with its borders recognized as legitimate and inviolable by the UN Security Council. When that happens, Israel will be free from territorial expansion and the burden of the occupation, which must be horrendous, but is rarely discussed. And if requested by either party, I would recommend that the U.S. provide military police in order to keep order during the transition. Israel will be greatly strengthened by this process because the Arab states all agreed to extend normal relations once Palestine was secure. And that would have an enormous effect on the future of Israel. Pleased with Palestine's national sovereignty and independence, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, Iran, and many other countries long opposed to Israel's illegal occupation will have less reason, perhaps none, to challenge the Jewish state. Why? Because Israel will have finally agreed to abide by the Fourth Geneva Convention, which is very important because Israel not only signed the Fourth Geneva Convention, it was one of the driving forces for its enactment. Palestinians will be ecstatic. They will enjoy full citizenship for the first time since the end of World War II. For the first time in nearly a half century, America will be free, be liberated from complicity in Israel's unlawful treatment of Arabs. Extremist groups will lose one of the main stated reasons for being. The specter of religious war between the West and the East will be drifting away. Obama's act will also set free the people like us, and of America and Israelis alike, would be freed from the stigma that has existed for the last 40 years for having been international outlaws, which is the right way to characterize each of us. If Obama acts and perseveres, the world will rejoice in his statesmanship, and historians will record him a great peacemaker. His executive order, like the one that Abraham Lincoln used to emancipate the slaves, will herald the blessings of liberty for millions of long-suffering human beings. But Obama must act and act promptly and persevere. It won't work otherwise. Only a dream? Yes, but more than that, it's a vision that is as practical as it is humane. It will become the reality if our president sees clearly an act of statesmanship and moves decisively to grasp what I call the outstretched hand of destiny. Now, this is a tall order, but it will work if Obama is bestirred to action. He's toward the end of his 8-year term. He has expressed many times his sympathy for the Palestinians. Here is his chance to do something about it. And here is something that you can do something about it too. Back on the tables are several hundred copies of petition to President Obama. And this petition needs to have signatures on it. Obama needs to have a pile of these petitions show up every morning for a long time. It's the one hope I have that this message will finally reach him personally. I have tried numerous avenues for about 4 months to try to get the message to Obama. The bright promise that this approach holds for him personally, the bright promise it holds for the state of Israel, the bright promise it holds for Palestine and for the people of the United States. So if you would like copies of the petition, there are 200 or 300 of them on one of the tables back of this assembly hall. And I hope you'll act upon it. I won't give up. I have other avenues I will pursue, because I see this as the great hope of our country, of humanity. And if we act decisively through the president, good things will happen very soon. Of that I'm certain. So I invite you to take part. All of us were negligent during the early days of the development of the settlements. Today, 500,000 illegal settlers live on land that belongs to the Palestinian people. 500,000. And those 500,000 people encompass 1/2 of the land that Israel has occupied and treated as subordinate group of human beings. That's my message. I see hope today because I believe Obama is at the point in his presidency when he will be seeking a legend, a memorial to his service. And this could make him an all-time hero that would be matched by no one else. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Finley. We're just honored to have you with us today. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you've done over the years. I'm Janet McMahon. I'm the managing editor of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, and I'm going to give you a slightly different picture about the United States Congress. Our magazine has been covering pro-Israel political action committees, or PACs, since 1986. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of calls from people who want to know how much their congressperson got from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And I immediately tell them that AIPAC itself does not make campaign contributions. And I think it's very important not to accuse AIPAC of doing something it can truthfully deny, because that makes it too easy for AIPAC to deflect the argument and let itself off the hook. This is not to say, however, that AIPAC has nothing to do with campaign contributions, and that's something I'll get to shortly. In 1990, when we published Stealth PACs, written by our executive editor, the late Richard H. Curtis, there were about 128 pro-Israel PACs. Now there are around 30. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, whose website, opensecrets.org, I highly recommend, 31 pro-Israel PACs contributed a total of just under $3 million to congressional candidates in 2012. And I'm using 2012 figures because since the election is over, all the numbers are in, while this year's election is still a work in progress as far as campaign contributions are concerned. And as you can see on this chart, these pro-Israel PACs gave almost 60% of their contributions to Democratic candidates in 2012. So it is definitely not the case that only Republicans are eager to do Israel's bidding. All but one pro-Israel PAC gave to Democrats, and all but 6 to Republicans. Pro-Israel PACs have several interesting characteristics. First of all, in their filings with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, they all list themselves as unaffiliated. Now, most PACs have no problem identifying their affiliation or industry. For example, the 7 PACs under the National Association of Realtors umbrella, which Open Secrets lists as the top PAC donating in 2012, all list their industry as real estate agents. And each of the 7 PACs includes Association of Realtors in its name. I'm going to show you the names of the 31 pro-Israel PACs that Open Secrets has listed. What's very interesting about them is that all but 4 of them have very innocuous, one might even say misleading, names. Those 4 exceptions are the World Alliance for Israel, the Republican Jewish Coalition, the National Jewish Democratic Council, and Allies for Israel. What this means is that even the most conscientious voter who knows the name of every contributor to a candidate's campaign might not know that the candidate is receiving money from PACs that advance the interests of a foreign government. Another characteristic of pro-Israel PACs is that they prefer to give to reliable incumbents rather than challengers, regardless of the candidate's party or religion. They also give priority to members of congressional committees responsible for issues of concern to Israel, such as foreign affairs, armed forces, or budget. and they like to extend their largesse to members of Congress in leadership positions. For example, House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer's take from pro-Israel PACs used to be fair to middling, but as he climbed the leadership ladder, his contributions increased, to the point where he's now received a total of more than $250,000. Another tactic favored by pro-Israel PACs is called bundling. That's when a PAC collects checks from individual donors and hands them en masse to a favored candidate. This way, the candidate has no doubt about the source of the contributions, but the PAC is not required to disclose them to the FEC. Bundling began to become popular around 1994, when talk of campaign finance reform was in the air. It's a way to minimize the public impact of PAC contributions. So most traditional pro-Israel PACs use bundling as a way to disguise the full extent of their financial involvement. According to Open Secrets, the pro-Israel NORPAC, the number 5 contributor to Senator Mark Kirk's 2010 campaign, gave him $3,804. But individuals associated with that PAC ponied up more than $58,000. Similarly, Kirk received $114,904 from pro-Israel PACs, according to Open Secrets, but nearly 5 times that much from pro-Israel individuals. So PAC contributions, thanks to bundling, are just the tip of the iceberg. What's most striking about these 30-odd pro-Israel PACs, however, is their pattern of giving. Once you've read the FEC filings of a couple of them, it's almost completely predictable who the other ones will be giving to. And I can personally attest to this because I have gone through these pages of FEC reports. In fact, these PACs operate in lockstep to such an extent that some of the PACs that nominally represent a certain state don't give to a single candidate from that state. For example, here is the Washington Report's list of the top 10 recipients of pro-Israel PAC contributions in 2012. You can see that Steny Hoyer was number 4 in the House with $31,750, and that Democrat Ben Cardin of Maryland with $55,680 was number 4 in the Senate. Neither, by the way, faced a tight re-election campaign. Now, one would assume that some of the thousands of dollars these two men got came from the Maryland Association for Concerned Citizens, the pro-Israel PAC based in their home state. But here are the House candidates the Maryland PAC gave to in 2012. Steny Hoyer is nowhere to be found. Similarly, one searches in vain for Ben Cardin among the Senate candidates who received money from this particular pro-Israel PAC. Instead, the Maryland Association for Concerned Citizens gave to candidates as far away as Nevada, North Dakota, and California, but to not a single candidate in Maryland. This seems rather curious, to say the least, leading one to wonder how these pro-Israel PACs choose their beneficiaries. And that's where AIPAC comes in. A memo leaked to 60 Minutes and the Washington Post in 1998 reveals that AIPAC exercises a high degree of oversight and coordination over the smaller, money-giving PACs. The memo, written by AIPAC's Assistant Director of Political Affairs, Elizabeth Schreier, instructs a subordinate to pressure several PACs to donate to specific candidates. The first item, it's a little hard to read, I'll read it to you, says, ICE PAC, another descriptive pro-Israel PAC name, has done nothing in the Colorado, Louisiana, and Missouri race. They have given $500 to Evans and Daschle. On 6/30/86, they had $11,048. Try for $1,000 to Bond, Moore, Evans, Daschle, and Reed. So this memo makes clear that the recipients of pro-Israel PAC contributions are not necessarily selected by the individual PACs making those contributions. Despite this smoking gun memo, however, the Federal Election Commission classifies AIPAC as a membership organization rather than a political committee. And what this means is that AIPAC does not have to reveal its sources of income or its expenditures. Now, each of these 30 pro-Israel PACs that donate to congressional candidates must adhere to FEC regulations, which limit campaign contributions from PACs to $10,000 per candidate per election, $5,000 for the primary election, and another $5,000 for the general election in November. But if there are 30 unaffiliated PACs all giving to the same candidate, That's a potential haul of $300,000, not $10,000 per candidate. Indeed, for his first Senate race in 1998, the year of the AIPAC memo, Tom Daschle, who went on to become Senate Majority Leader, received more than $260,000 in pro-Israel PAC contributions. In 2010, Mark Kirk received over $100,000, more than any other House or Senate candidate that year. And as we've seen, that does not include contributions from pro-Israel individuals. So not only does the favored candidate benefit, but because it's broken up into smaller components, again, the extent of the lobby's influence on American elections is hidden. For example, there is no pro-Israel PAC listed as being among the 2010 top 10 PAC contributors by the Center for Responsive Politics. But that year, pro-Israel PACs contributed nearly $3 million to congressional candidates, making it the sixth largest contributor ahead of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By comparison, in 2012, the two Arab American PACs, the Arab American Leadership Council PAC and the Arab American Political Action Committee, gave a total of $20,000 in campaign contributions, less than 1% of the total amount contributed by pro-Israel PACs. Put another way, in 2012, pro-Israel PACs gave nearly 150 times more in campaign contributions. There's no question that AIPAC and the Israel lobby bask in their reputation of invincibility, but that reputation may be more shallow than it appears. For example, in 2010, it was clear that the last person the lobby wanted as senator from Kentucky was Rand Paul. We know that because pro-Israel PACs gave his Republican primary opponent $33,500 and $16,250 to the Democratic candidate for Senate, for a total of just under $50,000. Rand Paul got just $2,000, but he went on to win the election. Even the candidate who got the most pro-Israel PAC contributions in 2010, Mark Kirk, who now holds President Obama's seat from Illinois, barely won his election, despite a massive $115,304 in pro-Israel PAC campaign contributions, and that he raised more than $4 million more than his opponent. He still just barely made it. Kirk's history of pro-Israel PAC contributions is instructive. He started out getting $7,000 for his 2000 race, and it went up dramatically for each race thereafter. And when he got $91,200 for a House race in 2008, it was clear that they were setting him up to run for the Senate. Yet until recently, I never heard Kirk described as anything but a moderate Republican. As far as I know, his unwavering support of Israel was never a campaign issue, and the mainstream media certainly didn't raise it. Yet the evidence was there for all to see on his Senate campaign website. Not only does Mark Kirk write his name in Hebrew, but it's not in the stars and stripes, but the blue of the Israeli flag. So even when the mainstream media don't talk, campaign contributions do. I hope and urge you to take this information and make it public by attending campaign events and directly asking the candidates what they've done to deserve this money, by writing letters to the editor, etc. Let your fellow constituents know that their representative in Congress too often is putting the interests of a foreign government above their own. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce former Representative Cynthia McKinney of Georgia, who certainly knows what it's like to be a target of the Israel lobby. She was disappointed that she could not be with us in person today, but she had a prior commitment out of the country. However, she was kind enough to videotape a message for all of us.
This is Cynthia McKinney, and I am pleased to be able to make this video presentation for the Washington Report on the Middle East. The way in which one can best understand the terrain is to do the research. One can go to the congressional record and read laying out the facts. Earl Hilliard was a member of Congress who served along with me. He was from Alabama, I was from Georgia. He was the first African American to be elected to Congress from since Reconstruction, and I was the first African American woman to be elected to Congress from the state of Georgia. So Earl and I together went to Washington, D.C., and we both served on the International Relations Committee, and we both ended up being targeted by the pro-Israel lobby merely because we attempted to do our job and represent our constituents and represent the good people of the United States. I've written a book. The name of the book is Ain't Nothing Like Freedom, and it explains my experiences with the pro-Israel lobby, from candidate to having a redistricting case go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Anti-Defamation League becoming a party to that lawsuit, joining in with 5 racist whites who did not want black representation for them and their community in Georgia in the Congress. The next part of the comments that I'd like to make are around this issue of being caught in the eye of the storm. In a political campaign, the idea that's put forward is that you have to, if you want to prevail, if you want to win, money, message, and media are ways in which you can direct the torrents of the storm rather than to become a victim of the storm. The pro-Israel lobby usually has a whole lot of money, and those of us who act of conscience generally don't. You don't have to equal the dollars in the bank. What you do have to do is have enough money in order to do the things that are necessary in order to have a successful campaign. Enough does not necessarily mean the same as or equal to. I ended up being extremely embarrassed for no fault of my own, and then only to be told when I challenged Andy and said, "What happened? Why did you do this?" Then Andy said that he just didn't want to make them upset. Him not making them upset meant that I became expendable to him, and I was his friend. My very first chief of staff was his daughter, and that was the way I was treated because he didn't want to make them upset. Another item that I just jotted down in my notes was the need for critical discernment, knowing who's who in the zoo. We need to read the media of the other side. So I make sure that I read Haaretz, I read Forward, I read the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. Knowing who's who in the zoo will also lead you to my next topic, which is the 99% Club. We have members of Congress who are wonderful on 99% of the issues, 99% of the votes. But it's the one issue when it comes to Israel and the United States' relationship with Israel and holding Israel accountable for breaches of international law, breaches of U.S. law, and our just sense of human rights and dignity. They're not good on those issues. We have lots of members of Congress who are in the 99% club. But 99%, unfortunately, is not going to get, that 99% club are not going to be the members who will stop us from being involved in these wars. They are not going to be the members who will speak up when the United States is violating human rights and just basic dignity of other people. The last item that I want to discuss is, why is this important? It's important, one, because there's a group of us, we care about the dignity of the earth. We care about human dignity. We care about liberty. And we also know that you cannot support those warmongers, those who are ready to kill in an instant, those who hold cabinet meetings and decide that they're going to assassinate people, those who are willing to support a president who, by an executive order, by writing an executive order, will condemn to death an individual, or those who will not stand in the way of the machine, the war machine, when it decides that an entire country has to be destroyed. We have to know who's who in the zoo. And 99%, that 99% club isn't good enough. It hasn't been good enough for the people of Palestine. It hasn't been good enough for the people of Libya. It hasn't been good enough for the people of Syria. It won't be good enough for the people of Ukraine. That 99% club is a club that at the end of the day is at the cutting edge of everything that we are against. And so therefore, it's time for us to decide that we are going to win. It's time that we become the candidates who will say no to this awful agenda that dehumanizes, oppresses, and represses. I hope that you've received my message and that you understand that we have to utilize the tools that are there before us, the writings of others, the floor statements like Gus Savage's laying out the facts. That we have to understand who is our friend and who is in opposition to us. And sometimes our friends come from places where we least expect it. And those who are opposed to us come from places where we least expect it. We have to understand that we have to remain open, our senses attuned to something new, to this new paradigm that has been thrust upon us. But if we want peace and not war, if we want dignity and not repression and oppression, if we want love and not division and hate, then we're going to have to adjust to this new political paradigm and find friends in places that we didn't find them before. We're going to have to do things that we didn't think that we could do before. And we're going to have to step outside of our level of comfort. So for our sake and for our children's sake, let's do what we have to do to become winners. Thank you.
Thank you from afar, Cynthia McKinney. Finally, I'd like to introduce Delinda Hanley, who's the news editor and executive director of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, and who will give us a more complete picture of what Congress hath wrought.
Thank you. So you've heard about the high cost of Israel to our democratic political process. You'll be hearing much more about the costs Americans have paid for the Israel-U.S. relationship. I'm just going to focus on the dollars and good cents. Americans are concerned about domestic issues as our nation emerges from the 2008 financial crisis. We're worried about unemployment, rising food, fuel, affordable housing, and health care costs. We're also concerned about our aging infrastructure, crumbling roads, bridges, and decaying schools, deteriorating water systems, and electrical power grids. Despite our domestic economic fears, Americans are generous. Many of us believe we should help the poor, not just here at home where we have nearly 50 million Americans living in poverty. We also want to give food and medical assistance to help the hungry and vulnerable, especially children, survive conflicts and crises in the developing world. Most Americans would be surprised to see how little foreign aid our country actually gives as a percentage of our gross domestic product when compared with other nations. Foreign aid is only 1% of our federal budget, but in tough economic times like those we are facing today, foreign aid is sometimes considered to be low-hanging fruit, easy to cut, because it does not directly benefit Americans. And we are cutting back on aid compared to previous decades. I challenge American taxpayers to look a lot more closely at who gets $3.1 billion of U.S. foreign aid dollars every year. Do you know that more than 5% of our foreign aid is subsidizing one of the top 10 most powerful nations in the world? Israel, with a population of nearly 8 million people, about the same number of people who live in Hong Kong or New Jersey, is the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid. And that has been the case for more than a generation. 16 years ago, my dad, Richard Curtis, wrote an article called True Lies About U.S. Aid to Israel for the Washington Report. It could have been written today. Most aid recipients, he said, are developing nations, which either make their military bases available to the U.S. or have suffered some crippling blow to their abilities to feed their people, he said. Israel, whose troubles arise solely from its unwillingness to give back land it seized in the 1967 war in return for peace with its neighbors, does not fit those criteria. Israel tries to give Americans the impression that they are in grave danger. They face annihilation. Their urgent appeals bring in significant charitable contributions, both from well-meaning evangelical Christians and American Jews. Soft-hearted Americans send U.S. tax-deductible donations to 27,000 nonprofit organizations in order to help the needy, including Jewish immigrants and Israeli soldiers. Who knew that we could get a tax write-off by sending pizzas and sodas to Israeli soldiers in tanks and at checkpoints? Birthright Israel sends 37,000 young Jewish people on free 10-day trips to Israel each year. Wealthy Americans donate $660 million a year for these trips, and the students are not permitted to travel to the West Bank, Gaza, or East Jerusalem. Does Israel really need our handouts? Let's compare Israel's economy to other countries. Israel's 2013 per capita gross domestic product was $34,900. That put it below Britain at $37,300 and France at $35,700 and just above the EU at $34,500. According to the National Power Index, Israel's army ranks 6th in the world. Israel has nuclear weapons, unlike any of its neighbors. Israel ranks 4th in technological capacity and is among the world's leaders in science. According to Haaretz, Israel's unemployment rate is 6.2%, while America's is 7%, and Europe's average unemployment is 12%. Israel ranks 15 on the UN Development Index, illustrating the high quality of life for Jews living in Israel. Israelis can expect to live until they're 81.8, and Americans' life expectancy is 78.6. Israel's state-funded health care is ranked 4th in the world, and the U.S. is in the bottom of Bloomberg's list of 48 countries. As I mentioned, Israel receives more than $3.1 billion in direct foreign assistance each year, which is roughly 1/5 of Americans' entire foreign aid budget. U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel recently promised that this aid would not be reduced, even while he listed significant cuts to America's defense budget. In fact, in June 2013, the House Armed Services Committee voted to give Israel an extra $500 million in military aid, for missile interception systems. President Barack Obama boasts that the U.S. has never given so much military aid to Israel as under his presidency. Cheryl MacArthur, the Washington Report's Congress Watch expert, tallies up U.S. aid to Israel for our magazine. As a conservative, defensible accounting of U.S. direct aid to Israel, MacArthur's estimate does not include the costs resulting from the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. Hundreds of billions of dollars, which many believe to have been undertaken for the benefit of Israel. For the year 2014, Israel has received $3.4 billion from the foreign aid budget and $2 billion in federal loan guarantees. That's $9,315,068 per day, 365 days a year. If you add grants and loans, Israel has received since 1949 a grand total of $134.21 billion, excluding the $10 billion in U.S. government loan guarantees it's drawn to date. And Cheryl MacArthur's calculations are modest. A respected economist, Dr. Thomas Stauffer, estimated that Israel cost the U.S. about $1.6 trillion between 1973 and 2003 alone, more than twice the cost of the Vietnam War. And that's not all. Israel gets some unique benefits. Washington has granted Israel $19 billion in loan guarantees in recent years to make it easier to borrow overseas. Israel gets its aid money at the start of each year, unlike other nations. This means Israel can start earning interest on the money right away, and the U.S. government, which operates at a deficit, must borrow the money to pay Israel and then pay interest on the amount all year long. Israel can use 25% of U.S. aid to buy arms from Israeli companies. Congressional legislation requires us to maintain Israel's qualitative military edge. That means anytime another country in the Middle East buys U.S. arms, we have to make sure Israel gets better weapons. We regularly transfer surplus military equipment to Israel. Israel is now storing equipment worth more than $1.2 billion. Well, America also gives $1.5 billion to Egypt's 85 million people. Well, actually, most of that goes directly to Egypt's military for meeting its obligations under the 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty. Jordan's 6.5 million people get $660 million a year for keeping peace with their neighbor. Aid to Israel is a subject that rarely makes it into the mainstream media. We were stunned when Walter Pincus, who reports on intelligence, defense, and foreign policy for the Washington Post, tackled this normally unmentionable subject. Days after Israel's cabinet cut nearly $2 million from Israel's own defense budget, on October 18, 2011, Pincus pointed out, if Israel can reduce its defense spending because of domestic economic problems, shouldn't the United States, which must cut military costs because of its major budget deficit, consider reducing its aid to Israel? I'd like to conclude by stating the obvious. The U.S. President and Congress give aid to Israel for domestic reasons, in order to please Jewish and evangelical Christian voters who are often more pro-Israeli than Israelis. It is mind-boggling that when it comes to Israel, U.S. taxpayers' largesse has no preconditions. Israel has a green light to use American tax revenue for military operations, which destroy Palestinian or Lebanese roads, water tanks, sewage lines, electrical power plants, and police stations, not to mention shops, homes, schools, orchards, and lives. Sometimes Israel demolishes projects like parks, playgrounds, ports, and other vital infrastructure paid for by American taxpayers and donors. It's past time to halt U.S. aid until Israel complies with UN resolutions, withdraws from the occupied territories, and makes peace. According to surveys, A growing number of Americans want Israeli aid levels the same, reduced, or canceled. With the prospect of prolonged fiscal austerity in the United States, overall American public support for foreign aid may diminish in the years ahead. Economic conditions in the United States should affect future aid to Israel. Cutting off aid to Israel is the logical and economical and ethical thing for Americans to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Delinda. That was very sobering. If there are any questions, we can take them now, and including questions for Congressman Finley. He is in the audience now, but we can get a microphone over to him if you'd like to ask him something. Okay, let's see. Do we have someone with a microphone here? Okay, so we'll start with you. Oh, yeah.
My name is Aman Khan. Okay.
Dale.
My name is Aman Khan, and I am from Warrenton, Virginia. I'm 72 years old, so I learned so many things in my life, especially living in the United States for 40 plus years. When I was a little boy, I was guest in some distant aunt's house, and she had her own son too. So when the time come to eat lunch, she will make breads and rub a little bit butter on top of the bread for me and give the bread to her son, has no bread on top of it. And I said, why? Then I find out one day that she put big chunk of butter inside the pocket of the bread. This is how we are treating the world and the Israel.
Thank you very much.
Questions on the side? Right here.
What? I guess we'll alternate sides here.
Why has it not been possible to designate AIPAC as a foreign lobby?
Well, the FEC, for example, has classifies it as a membership organization, and we actually, the Washington Report and other distinguished people brought a suit against the Federal Election Commission asking that it classify Israel as a political action committee. And we did not win that suit. It was thrown out because because the FEC changed its rules, and all of a sudden AIPAC did fit the criteria for a membership committee. The foreign lobby, and I think that's something Grant might talk about too, that's part of the Justice Department, right? And the Justice Department has not enforced, they've just kind of let it slide. They have not insisted that AIPAC be a foreign lobby. And in fact, when it started, I shouldn't talk about this because Grant is really the expert, but when it started out, it was a foreign lobby, and it kept morphing into different forms, and now people who represent AIPAC don't have to register as the agents of a foreign government. So the rules that are there are not enforced, and other rules make it possible for AIPAC and other lobby entities to just fly under the radar. Okay, sir.
My name is Yusuf Barakat. I was born in Haifa, Palestine in 1935. I became a refugee in my 12th birthday in August 1947. I now live in Michigan, and I'm 78 years old, and I plan to be a candidate for the U.S. Senate from Michigan. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Alison Weir and all the group that has brought this to light. It is really phenomenal now that Israel is being exposed for what it really is. I did hear Congressman Finley speak about the two-state solution. And I just want to tell you, Congressman, with all respect, it is totally unacceptable for us. It is only 28% of the land, and we will always be refugees. I think we should open up the borders and make Palestine and Israel one nation, and all people live there. Thank you.
I'd just like to say in response that beside Mark Kirk, my bête noire in the Senate was Carl Levin, who is retiring as senator from Michigan this year, and he's received, he has received more pro-Israel PAC money than any other member of Congress, and his career total is about $750,000. So, okay, let's see. Okay, sir?
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Jumping.
My question is regarding what you had said about the number of pro-Israeli PACs has been shrinking over the years from, you said, over 100 to now there are currently about 30. And I was wondering if there's a certain trend with regard to private individuals donating, because we saw that, Sheldon Adelson donating, I believe it was $10 million to Mitt Romney, and then you have, I believe it's Haim Saban on the Democratic side donating all these millions. And do you think this is do you have any opinion on whether this is purposeful, or is this just, they just happen to be seeing more private donations?
Yeah, I think the landscape has changed with the super PACs and the Citizens United ruling. It's just making it possible for new categories of contributors to enter the arena. So I think that the law has changed, and that's enabled these other large PACs to come into existence. And in some ways, I think a lot of them don't have to report their donors. Well, the small PACs do have to report their donors, so it's even less visibility, it's less transparent than these small PACs are required to be. So. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Lynn Carlton. I'm from Connecticut. I used to read the Near East report, which comes from AIPAC. And years ago, I read in there that they ask each and every incoming congressman to sign a pledge of loyalty to Israel. And I'd like to ask Paul Finley if he knows about that, and I'd like to ask anyone else if they can respond to that. Does each and every congressman have to sign a pledge of loyalty to another country?
There's no requirement, but many of them do, and those who don't are headed for trouble because the lobby for Israel wants a pure level of support in both houses of Congress. They don't always get it. This past year, we've seen 2 occasions when the lobby did not prevail. One had to do with Obama's desire to fire a warning shot over Syria, and the people back home made it very plain to their representatives that they did not want that to happen, and it died. And there was another occasion in which Israel did not get its way, and that had to do with the preliminary agreement on negotiations with Iran. There, too, the lobby did not prevail. Now, it may be they're on the downward slide. I surely hope that's true. But maybe the American people are being better informed about issues like Iran and any of the other issues that come before Congress. I know that a lot of members of Congress are bought and paid for, you might as well face it, and they're not going to change. No resolutions that we pass here will deter them. In fact, I think my book, The Dare to Speak Out, had 2 impacts, one of them very desirable, the other not. One impact was to alert many people to the menace posed by the lobby to our country. But the other was a signal to the new members of Congress: if you don't want to have the fate that came to Paul Finley and a few others, you better go along with Israel. So it's been a two-edged sword. I'm deeply grateful for what the Washington Report does on awakening the American people to the facts of life. They reach a big audience, I think about 25,000 readers of the magazine, but it's only a beginning. And one thing we all could do is to encourage other people to read that magazine. I have a number of friends in Jacksonville who look to its arrival every month or every other month, and they consider it the best in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Where's the other one? Over here. The gentleman here in the second row.
My name is Mohammed Husseini from the Arab League. I just would like to ask you, Delinda, and Mr. Paul Finley, you suggested both that aid to Israel should be cut off until Israel accepts peace or just peace. But in the absence of values of fairness and justice, good and right and wrong, what do you think that the Arab world should do in order to convince the United States that their national interest also is with the Arab world?
Would you like to start that, Paul? Thank you for your question, Ambassador.
The comments I made perhaps were not well understood. I think it has unique merit because it appeals to the Israelis who are troubled about the future of a Jewish majority state. The demographic tide of Arab birth rates in another generation is going to result in more people of Arab ancestry than Jewish people in the area that Israel controls. Now, how are they going to deal with that when the crisis comes? Well, they abide by what Rabbi Kahane called for in a book that he wrote some years ago. Arabs must go. Well, they have to, for their own survival as a Jewish majority state, well, they have to drive Arabs out of the territory they're now in. That's hardly a prospect that appeals to anyone, I don't believe. And that's why I am very pleased with the proposal that I made, which guarantees that Israel will continue to be a Jewish majority state for a long time, because under my proposal, the entirety of Palestine will be outside the perimeter of Israel and not counted. The Arab people in East Jerusalem will be outside. So I think it gives a increased lifespan of about 3 or 4 generations to a Jewish majority state. But at the same time, it brings into being a state of Palestine. And that, I think, is highly to the advantage of every party in the Middle East and every party worldwide. So I hope you'll give serious thought to the choices, because we're headed for a dismal period in the Middle East the way things are going. When that Arab majority occurs, there will be constant pressure to change the name of the state to the whole thing Palestine. That will cause a terrible backlash by the Jewish people in Palestine. It's far better to make a compromise that brings about an independent Palestine right now, and also brings about the assurance of a Jewish majority Israel for some time to come.
May I just
add one thing? Delinda, do you want maybe you want to come up here?
I'd like to add one more thing to the Arab League ambassador's question, what Arab countries should do. And I think they're already doing a lot. They're starting to buy weapons from other nations. They're starting to really look to China and other countries to buy buy things, they can use their economic power, and they are already. I think Americans, you've been friends with us for a long time, and maybe it's time to show us some tough love. And I'm going to be a little bit of a hog here and ask Paul Finley a question here. What do Congress people say in the locker rooms about being beholden all the time to Israel? What do they talk among themselves?
Well, a few of them will say, Paul, I agree with you, I admire what you're doing, but I can't do it. You understand? That's their attitude. I think most of them are good citizens or want to be. And the influence of Israel as of today is so great on Capitol Hill that they see danger of not surviving the next election if they challenge what Israel is doing. And it may be a disappointment to you to hear, but most people in the Congress like to get reelected. That's number one.
We can take a couple more questions. Okay. Oh, yes, sorry, I'm not.
If I wanted to add really what the Arab American is doing here in United States, please. Can you answer me?
I'm sorry.
What the Arab American doing in United States? I mean, we're talking about in the region, but what about us here? What are we doing?
You mean, why don't you have PACs?
Exactly.
And why you don't get
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank
well,
you.
I think Arab Americans are from many different countries, and they're trying to make a living and in a very potentially hostile environment. I mean, there was definitely a change after 9/11. I think that people were very fearful of speaking out, and so it's just they're newer to this country. They're not coalesced around a single issue. And the Jewish lobby has been in development, as Alison Weir and others will explain later, for 100 years. So it's an uphill battle, but I think you have to just start participating and just keep at it, and hope that as that is happening, other Americans are getting more informed about what their money is doing and what their government is doing. I mean, I don't think it's only up to Arab Americans by any means at all. So, okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. And now Delinda Hanley will segue into her next role as moderator of our coming panel.